Chapter 1243. Shang Yusun's first reaction was to set up a barrier around himself. The terrifying power of the explosion was completely blocked outside. Even so, the Tianlei was right above his head. The distance was extremely close, and it was impossible to completely avoid it. That shocking aura rushed over, causing his chest to feel stuffy, and he almost knelt on the ground. However, he still forced himself to stand and quickly looked up. At this moment he finally saw clearly what had happened. The heavenly lightning that was supposed to descend had been completely intercepted by a sword that had appeared out of nowhere. Silver light flickered on it, and sparks flew everywhere. Bang! The sound of something exploding was heard. Shang Yusun looked down and saw that the yuan instrument that he had painstakingly forged had cracked because the Tianlei's tempering had been interrupted and the change in temperature was too great. Shang Yusun raised his eyebrows and threw the item on the ground. He couldn't help but shout. Who the F***ck did this? His shout was like thunder, instantly reverberating throughout the myriad wine mountain. Chu Luiyue paused and felt a little guilty. She had originally planned to bring Scarlet Heavensword here and wait for the Tianlei in the spring to gather again before putting it in for tempering. Who knew that things would develop like this? At this moment, Shang Yusun also noticed Chu Luiyue's existence and looked over with his sharp eyes. Who? Come out! As he shouted, he angrily rushed over, intending to arrest her. Seeing that the other party was rushing down, Chu Luiyue knew that she couldn't hide, so she quickly stood out. Student Chu Yu greets elder. Only then did Shang Yusun see the person in front of him clearly. This was a youth who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old. His figure was thin and slender, and his face was delicate and clean. His face was a little pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he had just been through trouble. Shang Yusun shouted angrily. At this time, all students in the academy are forbidden from stepping into Myriad Wine Mountain. Don't you know? Chu Luiyue thought that of course she knew, and this was not the first time she had committed a crime. She raised her eyes slightly and looked over the shoulder of the middle-aged man in front of her. In the air, Scarlet Heavensword was continuously swallowing the Tianlei that was falling from the sky. Moreover, there were quite a few of them in Tianlei, which showed that this person was not weak. She was slightly relieved and bowed to admit her mistake. Elder is right. I didn't do it on purpose. It was just a moment of desperation that I accidentally barged in. Don't tell me these useless things. When Shang Yusun thought of the incomplete divine artifact that he had destroyed, he couldn't help but feel angry. He had been in Lingxiao College for so many years, but this had never happened before. A student. He had actually barged into the Thousand Wine Mountain just like that, even interrupting his refining process and intercepting his Tianlei. He must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's gall. I think you're going against the heavens. Immediately put away that broken thing of yours. Then, ask your master to come over and apologize to me personally. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment and felt a little troubled. Scarlet Heavensword had rushed out by itself just now. It would not be that easy for her to put it away now. Besides, she had come for the Tianlei of the Thousand Wine Mountain. It was not easy for her to find it, so how could she just leave like that? As for asking her master to come over, she wondered what Elder Wan Zheng's expression would be if he heard this news. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, then revealed an apologetic and earnest smile. Elder, what happened today was really purely an accident. I know that I was wrong and the consequences are serious. There is no reason for me to escape punishment no matter what. But, can you please wait for a while? Shang Yusun raised his eyebrows and glared at her. Wait for what? Chu Luiyue paused for a moment, then stretched out a finger and pointed upwards. She lowered her voice and said, just wait for me to finish refining the yuan instrument. Shang Yusun was so angry that he almost laughed. He had never seen a student like this before. Not only did she make a mistake, but she also took advantage of him. She was about to die, but she still had the nerve to ask for conditions? He sized up Chu Luiyue again. Alright. Kid, you're young but you've got guts. What kind of treasure is that yuan instrument of yours? You even dared to snatch the Tianlei that I triggered. You, suddenly, his voice stopped abruptly, and the way he stared at Chu Luiyue changed. Chu Luiyue felt inexplicably guilty and could not help but ask. Elder, are you looking at me like that? Shang Yusen narrowed his eyes. What did you say your name was? Chu Luiyue answered honestly. Chu Yu. It's really you. Shang Yusen's mouth twitched. He was too agitated just now, so he did not hear or pay attention to Chu Luiyue's self-introduction. It was only after taking a closer look that he felt a little familiar. Chu Yu. Wasn't that the kid he and Bo Yen were talking about during the day? Chu Luiyue blinked. The elders of Lingxiao College basically knew her by now. But this seemed to be the first time they met. And she also felt that this face was a little unfamiliar, as if she had never seen it before. If I remember correctly, you were locked up in Mount Prengmin for trespassing on Mount Wanjiao, right? How long has it been since you came out? As Shang Yusen spoke, he suddenly thought of something and turned around abruptly. Wait. That thing. Is that the divine artifact that I took back from Blue Feather's Abyss? The item that Chu Yu brought with him, which was powerful enough to intercept his Tianlei, seemed to be that? Cough, elder is wise. Chu Luiyue smiled awkwardly and said very honestly and uneasily, I'm sorry. I really don't have any other intentions this time. I just want to borrow a few Tianlei. Digression. Dear friends of the September list, please join the group as soon as possible for verification. The list will be updated on the 7th. After the comments section is opened, it will also be pinned. In addition, from today until the morning of the 13th, there will be a super huge event in the comment section. For details, please see pinned. Other readers other than Xiaoxiang can also participate in the event. Thank you, Big Pair. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1244. Shang Yusen thought that he was hallucinating. What did you say? He gritted his teeth and asked word by word. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, with a hint of gnashing teeth. Chu Luiyue shrank her neck. There was nothing she could do. She had snatched his things, so she felt guilty. But there was really nothing she could do about this. Who knew that he was refining here? Besides, after she came here, she didn't do anything, and Scarlet Heaven Sword ran out on its own. It wasn't all her fault. However, she didn't dare to say such words of justification again. And it seemed that it was useless to say it. She lowered her head. This student knows her mistake. This sincere appearance of admitting her mistake made Shang Yusen unable to vent his anger. You're quite promising. To think that you can say that. Shang Yusen flicked his sleeve and looked back at the top of the mountain. In the Tianlei that was constantly hacking down, a long sword could be vaguely seen. That Scarlet Heaven Sword? He narrowed his eyes and asked. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised that he actually recognized the sword, but on second thought, after all, he was an elder of the academy, so it wasn't strange for him to know this. After all, this was a divine artifact refined by the academy's ancestors, and that notebook had always been kept in the academy. Yes. You got lucky, kid. Shang Yusen snorted. He had been thinking about this thing for so many years, but he never got to see it. Who would have thought that he would miss it during a short period of seclusion? The key was that Scarlet Heaven Sword had recognized a master. A venerable divine artifact recognizing a master. It wasn't that simple. He didn't know how this kid did it. Chu Luiyue lowered her head even more. This student is guilty. She vaguely sensed that this elder's attitude towards Scarlet Heaven Sword seemed to be a little different from the other elders. Elder Bo Yen, and even Elder Shu Feng, who had personally gone to snatch Scarlet Heaven Sword back then, didn't seem to know so much about Scarlet Heaven Sword. Is it tempering its soul? Shang Yusen's next word surprised Chu Luiyue. But on second thought, the other party was a blacksmith in the first place, and his rank wasn't too low either. It wasn't too surprising that he would be able to see through it with a single glance. Elder's insight is truly admirable. You don't have to flatter me. To be honest, I am much more familiar with this Scarlet Heaven Sword than you are. Unfortunately, he was not fated to do so. Since the venerable artifact could recognize a new owner, it meant that there was no artifact soul inside. Thinking back to what Bo Yen had told him before, he could more or less guess what was going on. The sword's soul had been transferred to the venerable divine artifact that lacked an artifact soul, forcing it to recognize him as its master. Such a situation was 1 in a million, but it really happened. This really made it impossible for anyone to be jealous. Why are you still standing here? Why aren't you going up? Shang Yusen shot a disdainful glance at Chu Luiyue. Don't tell me you can't even do this? Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before he realized that he was urging him. Didn't he want to teach him a lesson just a moment ago? Why did he suddenly seem so supportive now? You don't mind? Chu Luiyue asked tentatively. Why are you being so wishy-washy? If I mind, didn't you already take Tianlei away? Shang Yusen simply wanted to take action. This kid looked quite smart, but why was he so stupid at the critical moment? The Yuan instrument that he wanted to refine was already damaged and could not be salvaged. There was no use in regretting it. On the other hand, the Scarlet Heaven Sword was at an extremely important juncture. If any problems occur during the process of refining the artifact soul, it could lead to failure. Why aren't you going? Are you going to watch such a treasure be destroyed? Shang Yusen finally could not hold back. He grabbed Chu Luiyue's shoulder and pushed him hard. Hurry up and go. Chu Luiyue did not hesitate anymore. Thank you, Elder. With that, he tapped his toes and quickly flew toward the top of the mountain. Shang Yusen raised his head to take a look. The number of Tianlei in the sky was decreasing. Those were all summoned when he wanted to refine the artifact. The process was interrupted, so the rest naturally did not appear. The previous ones were consumed extremely quickly. At this time, only half of them were left. However, until now, there was still no big movement on the Scarlet Heaven Sword. This also meant that there was still a long way to go before it could refine the artifact soul. Shang Yusen looked for a while and could not help but snort coldly. I still have to do it. Troublesome. With that, he stomped heavily on the ground and soared into the sky. Chu Luiyue rushed to the top of the mountain. The Scarlet Heaven Sword was floating in midair. Nearly 2/3 of the golden patterns on the scabbard had already appeared. However, the aura around the sword seemed to have become much more chaotic, and there was a faint tendency for it to go berserk. Girl, you must hold this sword well. If you don't control it well, the artifact soul might be unable to suppress it and cause the entire process to fail. Although Taizu's voice was weak, it was exceptionally serious. Although this was not refining artifacts, it was extremely difficult to refine the artifact soul of a venerable artifact. Chu Luiyue nodded. I know. She held her breath and stepped forward. Passing through the countless flashing lightning, she held the Scarlet Heaven Sword in her hand again. Then, she continued to pour her force into it. The effect was immediate. Soon, the violent aura around the Scarlet Heaven Sword calmed down again. That familiar and subtle feeling of connection was gradually increasing. All of a sudden, Tuanzi ran out of her body and plunged into the spring below. Chu Luiyue looked down. Ripples appeared on the calm water surface, but she could still see countless Tianleis swimming crazily in it. Boom! Another loud sound was heard. Chu Luiyue was shocked and quickly looked up. She saw that several Tianlei had appeared in the sky that had gradually calmed down. Between heaven and earth, wind and thunder rumbled. A figure stood in the air. It was Shang Yusen. His clothes fluttered and his sleeves waved. The aura around him surged crazily, and his might was impressive. As he did this, more and more Tianlei appeared in the sky. Chu Luiyue instantly understood. He was helping her to trigger the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue's heart was filled with gratitude. Thank you, Elder. Shang Yusen did not even turn his head and shouted, What are you thanking me for? Focus on refining the artifact soul. If you fail, I'll teach you a lesson. He had spent so much effort to help, and he would not allow failure. Chu Luiyue could not help but smile. Without saying anything else, she retracted her gaze and focused all her attention on the Scarlet Heaven Sword. Finally, the scabbard loosened a little. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she gripped the hilt tightly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1245. At this time, the entire top of Thousand Wine Mountain was enveloped by a dazzling silver tianlei. Amidst the rumbling of the flames, it was almost impossible to see the situation inside. One could only vaguely see Shang Yusen floating in the air. As for the place where the heavenly lightning gathered, only a slender figure could be vaguely seen. Seeing this scene, Rong Xiu stopped not far away. He had originally planned to help, but since someone had made a move first, he would just wait and see. It seemed that everything was going smoothly. However, this harmonious scene was quickly broken. Because someone else had come. Elder Ouyang had heard that Shang Yusen had come out of seclusion and was planning to refine weapons at Thousand Wine Mountain at night, so he wanted to come and take a look. However, as soon as he stepped into the barrier, he realized that something was wrong. This fluctuation was too shocking. He looked up almost immediately and was stunned by the scene in front of him. Tianlei kept striking down, but it was not aimed at Shang Yusen. However, Shang Yusen, who was standing in the air, was indeed triggering. What's going on? Elder Ouyang wanted to go forward without saying anything. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the side and blocked his path. Elder Ouyang, please wait. The deep and familiar voice stunned Elder Ouyang. When he saw the person in front of him clearly, his eyes widened in shock. Rong Xiu, why are you here? Rong Xiu smiled. I just arrived too. I'm waiting for someone. Elder Ouyang looked at the top of the mountain suspiciously. Who are you waiting for? There was no point in lying at this time. Anyway, he would find out in the end, so Rong Xiu was very honest. Chuyu. Chuyu? Elder Ouyang's eyelids twitched. He was very familiar with this name. Wasn't this the kid who had just caused a ruckus here a while ago? He reacted for a moment, and his expression became extremely interesting. He pointed at the blurry figure on the top of the mountain in disbelief. You mean, that's Chuyu? Rong Xiu nodded and explained in a gentle voice. She's busy right now and shouldn't be distracted. Elder Ouyang, please be considerate and go there later. Elder Ouyang, do you have something to do? On this Thousand Wine Mountain, there was so much tianlei. Wasn't it obvious what that kid was busy with? You, what is he doing now? Elder Ouyang was so agitated that he started to stutter. Alright. And that guy Shang Yusen, what is he doing now? Chu Yu's absurdity was one thing, but why did Shang Yusen seem to be helping? Elder Ouyang was confused. He was in a bad mood. You can ask them when they come down, said Rong Xiu with a smile. Elder Ouyang was also a weapon refiner, so he naturally understood that outsiders should not disturb them at this time. Otherwise, if something really happened, it would be hard to salvage the situation. Therefore, even if he felt that this scene was very strange, he could only suppress his anger and wait. This kid was punished once because he stayed in Thousand Wine Mountain during the forbidden time. Logically speaking, he shouldn't do it again in a short period of time. Today, he appeared again. Did he not learn his lesson, or did you embolden him? Elder Ouyang looked at Rong Xiu suspiciously. A faint light flashed across Rong Xiu's deep eyes, and his thin lips curled slightly. Nothing can escape Elder Ouyang's eyes. It's really you. Elder Ouyang flicked his sleeves. Previously, they said that you valued this Chuyu very much, but I didn't take it seriously. Now it seems that it's true. If it was an ordinary person, Rong Xiu would never have brought him to Thousand Wine Mountain at this time. Seeing Rong Xiu smiling without saying anything, Elder Ouyang couldn't help but raise his voice. Rong Xiu, it's true that you can come and go here at will, but that kid can't. Don't think that Chuyu can escape punishment with your help. Not only did he knowingly break the law, but he also did it again and again. If he didn't teach him a profound lesson this time, he would really be lawless in the future. Rong Xiu thought that if the punishment was still in Guanpengmin Mountain, she would probably be very happy to hear it. But he still had to give her face. So, he seemed to nod in agreement. Elder Ouyang is right. Elder Ouyang was depressed when he saw that Chuyu was stubborn and unmoved by force or persuasion. Chuyu was obviously not very old, but he was very shrewd and thoughtful. Even at his age, he couldn't see through Rong Xiu's thoughts. Just like now, Rong Xiu made it clear that he was on Chu Yu's side. Not only did he bring Chu Yu in during the forbidden time, but he also allowed him to do so on the top of the mountain. The mouth of the spring was right there. But Rong Xiu's behavior made it impossible for him to really get angry. Because he was Rong Xiu. Elder Ouyang glared at him. It's not wrong for you to protect that Chu Yu. But you have to make it clear to me first. What is that kid doing up there now? Rong Xiu paused. Now he's holding the divine weapon that appeared in the dark feathers abyss. Elder Ouyang was stunned for a moment, but he immediately understood. The weapon's soul? That divine weapon was not ordinary, so of course he had heard about it. It was just that he was too excited just now to remember it in time. But now that Rong Xiu reminded him, he immediately understood. Chu Yu was going to refine the weapon's soul for that divine weapon. No wonder. She couldn't even trigger the heavenly lightning with her own strength, so why didn't she come here? Shang Yusin also had a problem, but he was still doing his best to help. He still hasn't changed his mind about that thing. Elder Ouyang rolled his eyes. Even if he thought with his toes, he knew that Shang Yusin was definitely going for that divine weapon. Boom, boom, boom. Another earth-shattering sound. The entire Thousand Wine Mountain was as bright as day. As those Tianlei continued to fall, the golden patterns on Scarlet Heaven Sword gradually appeared after being refined over and over again. Chu Liwei held the sword hilt tightly with both hands, held his breath, and stared at the scabbard. Finally, the last pattern lit up. Swoosh! The eyes of the dragon head on the sword hilt suddenly burned with flames. One gold, one blue. It was like a dragon that had been sleeping for a long time had finally woken up. The dragon's roar roared. It resounded throughout the world. Chu Liwei gritted his teeth and pulled the sword hilt with all his might. Clang. The sword body finally separated from the scabbard. At this moment, all the Tianlei in the skies suddenly fell together. Shang Yusin's heart skipped a beat. There was not enough Tianlei. He immediately turned around and shouted at Elder Ouyang, "Ouyang, don't waste your breath. Come up and help." Elder Ouyang was stunned for a moment. Is he calling me? Shang Yusin raised his voice. Hurry up. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1246. The corner of Elder Ouyang's mouth twitched. It was fine that Shang Yusin wanted to help Chu Yu, but now he was calling him over? What was going on? But looking at the situation in the sky, it was indeed very urgent. Elder Ouyang clenched his fists. Helping you this time, I'll get it back later. After saying that, he finally moved and rushed into the air. On the top of the mountain, Chu Liyue's figure was already covered by countless Tianlei and could not be seen at all. The night sky was dark, and all the Tianlei had just struck down. But the artifact's soul was obviously not completed yet, and he had to continue to attract more Tianlei. Elder Ouyang stood in the air with his hands crossed in front of him. An astonishing aura instantly enveloped him. Swish! He pointed to the sky. Soon, a loud sound came from the layers of rolling dark clouds. A silver Tianlei appeared again. With this one, the appearance of the heavenly lightning after that became logical. After a while, the sky was once again illuminated by several intertwined Tianlei. Only then did Shang Yusin finally heave a sigh of relief. If he was a little later, he was afraid that he would not be able to make it. The closer it was to the end, the more he could not relax. He looked down and couldn't help but murmur, "This kid, so many Tianlei, how did he get through it? Wasn't Chu Yu only a rank 7 warrior now?" Even if these Tianlei went straight for the artifact, he would be more or less affected by it if he stood next to it. Moreover, he was the new owner of Scarlet Heaven Sword and was responsible for guiding these forces to temper its soul. The consumption of his strength and spirit was also extremely terrifying. If it were other cultivators of the same level, they would have already fallen to the ground. But Chu Yu seemed to be very stable from the beginning to the end. I heard that he even defeated a rank 8 warrior some time ago as a rank 7 warrior. No wonder Elder Meng was so concerned. At first, he didn't take Chu Yu too seriously and only thought that he was a little kid who knew how to cause trouble and was a little smart. But it wasn't until now that he realized that this Chu Yu did have some ability. The dragon roared. The powerful pressure almost made Chu Liyue breathless. She madly circulated the force in her body and slowly pulled out the sword. From the part of it that had appeared, it could be seen that it was a silver sword. It was about 3 fingers wide, with 2 sharp edges and a thick middle. Just by looking at it, one could clearly feel the sharp and cold aura coming from it. Chu Liyue's heart was beating violently, and all he could hear was the sound of his blood flowing. Even though he had not completely drawn it out, Chu Liyue was already certain that this red cloud sword was more than 100 times stronger than the Long Yuan sword. That was an incomparable power. Occasionally, there would be some silver heavenly lightning flashing across it. However, the power of Tianlei, which was originally filled with a powerful aura, would be instantly devoured or annihilated the moment it landed on the sword. In front of Scarlet Heaven, even Tianlei paled in comparison. Chu Liyue could no longer remember how many Tianlei it had digested. However, as time passed, she gradually felt that something seemed to be condensing in Scarlet Heaven's sword. And the subtle connection between it and her became stronger and stronger. It was so strong that, at this moment, she could even faintly sense how much power Tianlei had been devoured by Scarlet Heaven's sword. A venerable artifact, seizing the power of endless Tianlei, tempering the artifact's soul. From this, one could see how powerful it was. At this moment, the few people on Thousand Wine Mountain were focused on Scarlet Heaven's sword. However, not far below Chu Liyue, some strange changes were also happening in the small spring. The calm water rippled slightly, and countless silver Tianlei gathered under the water, swimming and interweaving. A red figure was buried in it. It was Dumpling. The surrounding heavenly lightning continued to wander around its body. And the aura on its body was also quietly changing. Scarlet Heaven Sword was consuming Tianlei faster and faster. Not long after, Elder Ouyang noticed that the number of Tianlei in the sky was decreasing. He couldn't help but look back. Why is it so difficult to temper the artifact soul with this thing? The speed at which he attracted Tianlei couldn't keep up with the speed at which it was devouring. Shang Yusen also noticed this situation and couldn't help but frown. Scarlet Heaven Sword was more powerful than he had expected. It needed more Tianlei to continuously temper it. But now, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and Ouyang's situation might not be any better. Perhaps, even if the two of them tried their best, it still wouldn't be enough. At this moment, a tall and slender figure silently appeared in midair. Rong Xiu glanced at the sky. His expression was very calm. Then, he gently raised his hand. Boom! Almost in the blink of an eye, several Tianlei quickly gathered behind the clouds. These didn't hesitate at all and slashed straight down. In an instant, it was as if silver swords were raining down. Elder Ouyang and Shang Yusen both looked back in shock. Damn it, when did Rong Xiu become so strong? Shang Yusen couldn't help but curse. Elder Ouyang also swallowed his saliva with difficulty. How would I know? It had only been a few years, and Rong Xiu had already broken through to such a level? At this moment, Chu Liyue finally completely pulled Scarlet Heaven's sword out of its scabbard. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1247. The moment the long sword was unsheathed, there seemed to be a layer of invisible barrier shattering. An aura that seemed to come from a distant time and space instantly rushed out of the Scarlet Heaven Sword and entered Chu Liyue's body. It was as if there was a thread connecting her to the Scarlet Heaven Sword. The Scarlet Heaven Sword, which was originally extremely heavy, suddenly became as light as a feather at this moment. Chu Liyue's previous internal injuries also began to rapidly recover under the nourishment of this vast and gentle power. That aura was familiar, but also unfamiliar. It was familiar because it was mixed with the power of the sword soul of the Dragon Abyss Sword. Vaguely, it also seemed to have the aura of Taizu. As for the unfamiliar, that was the original power of the Scarlet Heaven Sword. She looked at the Scarlet Heaven Sword in her hand, and something seemed to surge in her heart. In the next moment, she swung her sword. A terrifying sword chi swept forward. After a short silence, a large number of trees in front of her were cut in half. When those trees fell together, Chu Luiyue realized what had happened and couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. She just wanted to give it a try subconsciously. It was just a light wave, but how could it produce such a terrifying power? At a glance, all the trees that could be seen had been silently cut down. But this was not the end, because these trees were unable to block this sword chi. Therefore, after it swept through the lush forest, its speed did not decrease at all and it headed straight for the barrier of the Thousand Wine Mountain. "Stop it!" Elder Ouyang was shocked and hurriedly shouted. Shang Yusen was about to move when he saw a figure flash past his eyes. It was Rong Xiao. He raised his wrist and a golden stream of light flew out quickly. Boom! The speed of this force was extremely fast. It caught up from behind and finally managed to stop the sword chi before it could hit the barrier. The two forces collided fiercely and produced an explosive sound. The barrier was impacted by the aftershock and shook violently. Elder Ouyang trembled with fear when he saw this. He hurriedly rushed over. He often came to the Thousand Wine Mountain, so he was very familiar with this and quickly strengthened the barrier. After confirming that the barrier was no longer in danger of being damaged, he let out a long sigh of relief. If the barrier was broken, everyone would know what had happened on Thousand Wine Mountain. It wouldn't be good if things got out of hand. Thinking of this, he became angry again. He raised his eyebrows and glared at Chu Luiyue, grinding his teeth. "Chu, you better give me an explanation." Chu Luiyue touched his nose and carefully put away the Scarlet Heaven Sword. With a thought, Scarlet Heaven Sword directly went to her dantian. In this way, she could still clearly sense all the movements on Scarlet Heaven Sword. This made her believe that Scarlet Heaven Sword's soul had been completely tempered, and it had indeed completely recognized her as its master. Her heart, which had been hanging in the air, was finally at ease. The most important matter had been resolved. Next, it was time to deal with the subsequent troubles. She looked at Elder Ouyang with a helpless expression, but her eyes were clear. "Elder Ouyang, I know I was wrong. No matter what, it was always good to admit his mistake first." However, Elder Ouyang already had experience, so he did not fall for her trick at all. With one hand behind his back, he snorted coldly. "You know you were wrong?" This old man didn't see it at all. "Chu, this is not the first time you broke the rules and barged into Thousand Wine Mountain, right? This old man remembers that it has only been a month since you were locked up in Pengmin Mountain for 10 days. Not to mention that you were also locked up in the middle of the month because of other mistakes. What, are you uncomfortable if you don't cause trouble for a day?" Elder Ouyang said angrily. "You really don't learn from your mistakes." Chu Luiyue waited for him to scold her before explaining herself in a low voice. "Elder Ouyang, this student really didn't mean it. You also saw the situation just now. That divine weapon needs to be tempered, so this student can only come here. And after coming here, it directly went out of control, which led to the following things. Don't give me that." Elder Ouyang irritably interrupted Chu Luiyue's words and only felt a headache. "Don't you know what level of strength you have now? You actually want to use your own strength to temper the soul of this divine weapon now. Do you think that you have been living too well during this period of time, or are you really not afraid of death? If something really happened, no one would be able to help her." Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. Although Elder Ouyang's words were harsh, he still considered her in his heart. Moreover, if he really didn't like her, he wouldn't have helped her without reservation just now. In the end, he still had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Chu Luiyue smiled at Elder Ouyang. "Isn't this student fine? Elder, although this student is young and inexperienced, I also know that life is precious and I don't dare to joke about this kind of thing." If he really didn't have the slightest confidence and urged her to come, she wouldn't have agreed. Elder Ouyang choked. What she said was not without reason. After all, whoever obtained such a treasure would not think too much about it. But it was still too dangerous. "What, do you think that with Rong Xiao around, you will be safe?" Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment and nodded seriously. You Elder Ouyang felt even more choked. Rong Xiu's lips slightly curved into a perfect arc, and he chuckled. Elder Ouyang, since I brought her here, I will naturally bring her back in one piece. Elder Ouyang flicked his sleeve. This interrogation couldn't continue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1248. Elder Ouyang couldn't ask the two of them anymore, so he simply changed his target. Shang Yusen, what's wrong with you? Rong Xiu was fooling around with Chuyu. Who was he? How could he help the tyrant? But Shang Yusen was really not afraid of Elder Ouyang. Hearing this, he crossed his arms and said lazily, "Didn't you see it just now? Help him. Didn't you see what he's holding in his hand?" He had been thinking about Scarlet Heavensword for many years, but he couldn't see it. Now that he finally had the chance, it had already recognized Chuyu as its master. Of course, he was unwilling. But what could he do? A divine weapon of this level would not easily recognize a master. Even if he had been thinking about it for many years, he didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. From the beginning to the end, he was just thinking about waiting for Scarlet Heavensword to be born. After it was brought back to the academy, he could seize the opportunity to observe and study it closely. Now, it had become Chuyu's divine weapon. Other than the word opportunity, there was no other way to describe it. Chuyu wanted to refine the weapon's soul for it. How could he just watch and ignore it? After all, he had been thinking about it for many years, so he still had some thoughts in his heart. Even if it wasn't for Chuyu, he had to do it for Scarlet Heavensword. Elder Ouyang felt uncomfortable all over. He closed his eyes and held his forehead with a headache. None of them were easy to deal with. However, it just so happened that these people were all eloquent, making it extremely difficult for him to even refute. Ouyang, there's no point in asking this now. Shang Yusen touched his chin. Didn't you participate just now? Elder Ouyang, if it wasn't for Shang Yusen urging him, would he have done this? It was his fault for being muddle-headed at that time. He actually helped. What you mean is that we're all in the same boat now. Shang Yusen looked at him strangely with an expression that said, "Aren't you talking nonsense?" Elder Ouyang's eyebrows twitched violently. He felt that it was wrong for him to even think about communicating with them. Shang Yusen, he was not in the academy all year round. Whenever he came back, he would go into seclusion to cultivate. He had always been carefree and did things according to his mood. Rong Xiu, one of the most outstanding geniuses in the academy. His position in the academy was extremely high, and he had even more privileges than some of the elders. Chuyu, there was nothing much to say about this. He was just an audacious brat. You've even taught me and made mistakes again. Elder Ouyang took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Shang Yusen, Bo Yen will know about what happened tonight sooner or later. Shang Yusen nodded. Of course he would know. The profound formation at the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain and the surrounding barriers still had a portion of his power. However, this is nothing. He already knew that Scarlet Heavensword was in Chuyu's hands. Refining the artifact soul. Could it still be considered a mistake? If it was in my hands, I would have done the same. Shang Yusen said indifferently with a regretful expression. Unfortunately, I'm not that lucky. As he spoke, he looked at Chu Liwei. I've helped you today. How about lending this Scarlet Heavensword to me for a day? Chu Liwei already knew that he had been concerned about Scarlet Heavensword for many years, so she nodded very straightforwardly. Chuyu will naturally repay Elder's kindness with gusto. Whenever you want it, just tell me. In any case, Scarlet Heavensword had already completely become hers. No one else could forcefully take it away from her, so there was nothing to worry about. Seeing that she was so straightforward, Shang Yusen instantly appreciated her a little more. Good. Just based on your words, I didn't help you for nothing today. As he spoke, he was so excited that he even reached out his hand, wanting to pat Chu Liu's shoulder. Rong Xiu silently took a step forward and stood between the two of them, preventing Shang Yusen's fan-like palm from landing on him. Elder Ouyang, I actually brought junior brother Chuyu here today. Everything happened because of me. I am willing to take all responsibility for this matter. Rong Xiu, Elder Ouyang had long expected that Rong Xiu would stand up for him, but when he really heard him say so, he couldn't help but be surprised. He really didn't understand why Rong Xiu was so protective of Chuyu. But it had to be said that with Rong Xiu's appearance, this matter wouldn't be too serious. He took a deep look at Rong Xiu, shook his head and sighed. You haven't set foot here for a few years. I never expected that this time, you actually, halfway through his words, he stopped, as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Rong Xiu's expression was the same as usual, and he smiled faintly. I haven't had time to thank you for today's matter. Elder Ouyang completely lost his temper. He looked around and furrowed his brows. On the top of the mountain, it was a mess. Countless mountains and forests had collapsed. Because of the bombardment of countless tunlei, large patches of black appeared on the mountain rocks, and some even had deep cracks. It wasn't difficult for anyone to guess what had happened here. It seems that Wine Mountain has to be closed for a while. It would take a lot of effort to repair it. In the sky, the dark clouds gradually dissipated. It was already early in the morning, and a ray of white appeared on the horizon. It seemed that it would be daybreak soon. Let's go. Let's go see Bo Yen together. Elder Ouyang let out a long breath and took the lead to leave. Chu Luiwei turned back to look at the spring. Dumpling was still inside. She opened her mouth and was about to shout when a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Kid, what are you looking at? Hurry up and follow. Elder Ouyang urged from the front. Chu Luiwei retracted her gaze. I'm coming. Her figure flashed and she left with him, never looking back. In the spring at the top of the mountain, a ripple flashed across and disappeared in an instant. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1249. Donghuang Clock Tower. In the solemn hall, the air seemed to have frozen. Elder Bo Yen sat at the top without any expression on his face. Only his slightly clenched fists showed that he was not as calm as he appeared to be. In front of him stood the 4 people who just came out of Thousand Wine Mountain. That's the gist of it. Elder Ouyang explained the cause and effect of the incident, and his mouth was almost dry from all the talking. After that, the hall fell into dead silence again. After a while, Elder Bo Yen spoke slowly. So, you rushed here early in the morning because you guys destroyed half of Thousand Wine Mountain? Shang Yusen could not help but remind him. Mainly to help Chu Yu refine Scarlet Cloud Sword's soul. The soul. Cough, it's just that some trees and rocks were destroyed, then? The spring is still fine. He did not say the last sentence, and even the words he said before became much softer under Elder Bo Yan's gaze. Those who knew Elder Bo Yan knew that he was rarely angry. But once he was angry, it was extremely difficult to deal with. Even Shang Yusen and Elder Ouyang, who had worked with him for many years, felt a chill. Chu Yu, in that case, this matter was still caused by you? Chu Liyue's shoulders drooped, and he lowered his head slightly. This student was rash and made a big mistake. Elder Bo Yen, please punish me. Of course you should be punished. Elder Bo Yen really did not know what to say. This Chu Yu, just when I thought he would be obedient and stop, he kept causing new problems. And each time, it was more serious than the last. This time, he even implicated Shang Yusen and Ouyang. Right, there was also Rong Xiu. Elder Bo Yen, if I did not take the initiative today, junior brother Chu, you would definitely not go to Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiu's tone was calm, but also very sincere. I promised you before that I would teach junior brother Chu you well. So now, the person who should be punished is me. Elder Bo Yen was so angry that he laughed. You think I won't punish you? You can't get away with this matter. Rong Xiu, if you want to take on everything, you have to see if it's feasible, and if you can take on the responsibility. His gaze swept across the few of them. None of you can escape. What kind of place was the Thousand Wine Mountain? It's fine if Chu Yu doesn't know, but the remaining 3 are very clear. Under such circumstances, they actually dared to do such a thing. They were simply trying to overturn the heavens. The 4 of them quieted down. Even Shang Yusen had lost his temper and stood there obediently. Elder Bo Yen closed his eyes. Who else knows about this? Elder Ouyang said, apart from the people in the hall, no one else knows. In other words, only Elder Bo Yen had received the news. This made Elder Bo Yen relax a little. If things got out of hand, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. He fell into deep thought and began to consider how to punish these people. Time seemed to pass extremely slowly. Since Elder Bo Yen did not speak, the remaining 4 also remained silent. Finally, after a long while, Elder Bo Yen raised his head and looked at Chu Luiyue. Chu Yu. Student is here. That artifact spirit has been refined successfully? Elder, it's done. Elder Bo Yen nodded. Although this matter was ridiculous, it wasn't completely fruitless. That divine artifact had already become Chu Yu's, and no one could snatch it away. Now that he was able to refine the artifact spirit and merge with it, it could be considered a fortunate thing. Although no one said anything about the divine artifact recognizing Chu Yu as its master, but in reality, there were quite a number of elders who were in the know who were extremely unhappy. In order to take back this artifact, the academy had prepared for a long time and put in a lot of effort. But in the end, it was taken by a new student who had just entered the academy for 2 months. Of course, they wouldn't be happy about it. But because this matter had already happened and couldn't be changed, they could only accept it. Only when Chu Yu took out his strength to prove himself, would he be able to convince those people. Elder Bo Yen actually thought highly of Chu Yu, and because of this, he gave him chances time and time again. Even if Chu Yu had violated the rules a few times, he still stood on Chu Yu's side. This time, Chu Yu had gone overboard, but he couldn't really do anything to him. After thinking about it for a long time, the only good news was that he had managed to refine a weapon soul. Elder Bo Yen comforted himself as he waved at Chu Luiyue. All right, you can go back first. Later, I will discuss with your master and see what kind of punishment we should give you. Chu Luiyue's thoughts moved slightly, and she instantly guessed that Elder Bo Yen had something to say to the other 3, so she tactfully took her leave. She bowed, then quickly turned and left the hall. Her actions were clean and tidy, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. Until her figure completely disappeared outside the door, Elder Bo Yen then looked at the remaining 3 people in front of him. His brows slowly creased, and his voice became more serious. This time, did it involve the spring eye? No. Elder Ouyang immediately said. At that time, all of us were above the mountain peak, and there was still some distance from the spring eye. In fact, the Tianlei had been swallowed by the Scarlet Heaven Sword, and other than some remnant energy waves that caused some damage to the surroundings, everything else was fine. Of course, this was ignoring Chu Yu's last unconscious strike. That's good. However, I will still personally check it later. Elder Bo Yen said. Regarding this, the 3 of them had no objections. The spring eye was of great importance, and it was normal for Elder Bo Yen to be so cautious. This matter must be kept a secret, and no one else can know about it. If one more person knew, it would be more troublesome. Although your actions today were pardonable. However, this punishment cannot be avoided. Elder Bo Yen looked at the 3 of them. Think about it yourselves, what should we do about this? The sky gradually brightened. When Chu Luiyue walked out of the Donghuang Bell Tower, it was already morning. However, there were not many people in the Qingming Square at this time, so no one saw her walk out. Chu Luiyue looked back at the closed door, pursed her lips, and then turned to leave, heading straight for Jianghu Mountain. When Chu Luiyue returned to Jianghu Mountain, she felt that something was wrong the moment she landed. She paused for a moment, but still walked forward. When she opened the door, she saw a familiar face. Dugumabao was sitting upright, and when he heard the sound, he looked up. Debao dash, Chu Luiyue called out to him, but when she met that pair of demonic purple eyes, she inexplicably felt a little guilty. Dugumabao just looked at her quietly. You went to Thousand Wine Mountain during the ban again? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1250. Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart. She knew that nothing could be hidden from him. Dugu Mabao seemed to have countless pairs of eyes in the academy. No matter what happened, he could always quickly and clearly understand it. Chu Luiwei had long felt that this matter was too strange, but she had never been able to get an answer. Just like now. Last night on Thousand Wine Mountain, there were indeed only the four of them. With the protection and concealment of the barrier outside the mountain, no one outside knew about it. Logically speaking, other than the four of them, Elder Bo Yen should be the only one who knew about this. And they were the ones who took the initiative to confess to Elder Bo Yen. Dugu Mabao's guess was so accurate. It really didn't make sense. Yes. Chu Luiwei chose to tell the truth. She didn't think that she had the ability to deceive Dugu Mabao. Dugu Mabao frowned slightly, and the look in his eyes became dangerous. Have you forgotten what I told you before? Of course, Chu Luiwei didn't forget. At that time, it was because Dugu Mabao made it clear that she was not allowed to enter Thousand Wine Mountain at that time that she obediently obeyed until now. Even if Dumplings stared at the spring and refused to leave every time, she never stayed there for too long. The situation today is indeed a little special, Chu Luiwei explained helplessly. I went to refine my weapon soul. Dugu Mabao snorted and turned his head away. Even if you don't go to Thousand Wine Mountain, there are other ways. There are many mountains where the weapon refiners are, and there are a few of them overseeing it. It's the same if you go to them. Why do you have to do this? Chu Luiwei's eyelids twitched. Tabeo, do you think that I can take this path? Since the first day she entered the academy, she had already heard many rumors about the weapon refiners. They were arrogant, unsociable, cold, and rarely came out even once in a year. She didn't even have enough time to admire them. How could they think of such a solution? Although she was bold and occasionally acted presumptuously, it didn't mean that she didn't know her limits. Dugu Mabao choked. Of course you. His voice stopped abruptly, and a complicated emotion flashed through his eyes. Chu Luiwei did not see the change in his expression clearly, but she could tell that something was amiss with his tone. She could not help but ask curiously, "Of course, what's wrong with me?" Dugu Mabao closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had regained their clarity. It's nothing. I was careless. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. She still felt that Dugu Mabao's answer was a little strange, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Even if you can't do it, Rong Xiu can. However, he brought you directly to Thousand Wine Mountain. Dugu Mabao sneered. Rong Xiu thought that the situation was not chaotic enough. Chu Luiwei lowered her eyes slightly and didn't reply. She hadn't thought of this before, but Rong Xiu was the number one on the Green Cloud ranking. How could she have forgotten about this? Judging from the polite attitude of the elders in the academy towards Rong Xiu, if he personally came forward, it might not be impossible to invite him. However, just as Dugu Mabao said, he didn't do so. However, this was understandable. After all, it was best not to owe favors. Relatively speaking, it was much more troublesome to ask those senior refiners for help than to go to Thousand Wine Mountain directly. Even though Rong Xiu might face quite a bit of punishment if he chose the latter, Rong Xiu definitely had his own considerations before he made this choice. Chu Luiwei thought for a moment, then walked over with an earnest smile. Dabao, don't be angry. This matter is already in the past, isn't it? Not only did I come back safely, but I also successfully tempered the weapon's soul. Even if I receive a little punishment, the benefits definitely outweigh the disadvantages. Dugu Mabao didn't say anything. How was he going to explain to her that he wasn't just worried about this? After pausing for a moment, Dugu Mabao finally shook his head. If there's a next time, I won't let you off. Chu Luiwei smiled, her eyes curved. All right. Dugu Mabao's gaze swept across her face, opened his mouth, and finally said, Since the weapon's soul has been tempered, you should study and cultivate more. There are very few venerable artifacts in the world. It's a great honor for you to be able to obtain one. You must cultivate well. Chu Luiwei nodded vigorously. Definitely. After spending so much effort, if she couldn't make the best use of it, wouldn't it be a huge loss? Dugu Mabao nodded and immediately stood up to leave. Chu Luiwei couldn't help but say, Dabao, are you leaving now? Aren't you going to stay a little longer? Dugu Mabao stopped in his tracks. I'll be back in the evening. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Ever since they came to Lingxiao College, she almost never spent too much time with Dugu Mabao during the day. His daily training was also held between evening and night. It was as if he had other important things to do at other times. But in the Lingxiao Academy, what kind of things did he need to do every day? Dabao, when you're not with me, where are you? Chu Luiyue finally couldn't help but ask. If I want to look for you, I don't even know where to go. Dugu Mabao turned around and glanced at her, his face expressionless. He said calmly, you don't have to look for me. If you're in trouble in the college, I'll rush over. After saying that, he directly lifted his feet and left. Chu Luiyue's frown deepened. What secret was he hiding? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1251. Chu Luiyue stayed anxiously in her residence for a while. In the afternoon, news came from the academy. Thousand Wine Mountain would be closed for maintenance for a month. The students were very surprised. After all, although Thousand Wine Mountain had a ban every day, it had never been closed for a month. Everyone was discussing this and coming up with all sorts of guesses. But in reality, even many elders were confused about this. It was still fine yesterday, but today, it was inexplicably going into seclusion for quite some time. It was really strange. But many elders knew that Thousand Wine Mountain was not an ordinary place, so they did not ask much. Although the students regretted that they lost a place to relax, it was only for a month, so they accepted it naturally. Of course, it was meaningless if they did not accept it. Chu Luiyue wanted to go out for a walk and then go to Thousand Wine Mountain to see Dumpling, but after thinking about it, she gave up. Now, she could only hope that Dumpling could safely pass the month in Thousand Wine Mountain. After temporarily putting this matter aside, Chu Luiyue began to wait for Rong Xiu to return. At the same time, she was waiting for the punishment she was about to face. She was not naive enough to think that she could escape. From Elder Bo Yan's reaction, this was the angriest he had ever been, and he would not let it go so easily. One must know that the last time he knew that she had taken the Scarlet Heaven Sword for herself, he did not show such an expression. This showed how important Thousand Wine Mountain was. This also made Chu Luiyue even more certain that there was a huge secret related to the academy hidden in the spring at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain. Chu Luiyue could not think of what the academy would do to her. Although Elder Wan Zheng and Rong Xiu were helping her, she instinctively felt that her fate would not be good. They waited all the way until nightfall. But the one who returned was not Rong Xiu, but Elder Wensi. Chu Yu. Elder Wensi stood outside the barrier and placed his green jade token on it. At the same time, he called out Chu Luiyue's name. Chu Luiyue, who had been waiting quietly in the room, immediately got up and walked out when he heard the noise. She saw Elder Wensi outside the barrier at a glance. At this moment, he was looking at her with a complicated gaze with one hand behind his back. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he unconsciously slowed down his steps. Elder Wensi, why are you here? Elder Wensi didn't say anything. He just looked at her like that, as if he was probing, puzzled and conflicted. After a long while, he said, "Come out first." "Oh," Chu Luiyue said, then walked out of the barrier, and then stood in front of Elder Wensi. "Did you get into trouble again?" Elder Wensi tried to make his voice sound calm, but in fact, everyone could hear the suppressed emotions in it. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment before nodding. Elder Wensi held his forehead, not knowing what to say. "Didn't you just come out from Pengmin Mountain? Why is he causing trouble again?" It had been a long time since he saw Bo Yan's expression. What was even more shocking was that this time, it seemed to have implicated Rong Xiu, as well as Shang Yusin and Ouyang, those two old fellows. "You're really getting more and more capable. Tell me, what did you do to make Bo Yan so angry?" Chu Luiyue immediately understood. It seemed that Elder Wensi didn't know about this matter. Although Elder Bo Yan was angry, he still chose to suppress this matter. On one hand, it might be because this matter involved a lot of people, and on the other hand, it might be to protect the secret of Thousand Wine Mountain. But Chu Luiyue had no way of knowing about this. She pursed her lips and asked carefully, "Elder Wensi, Rong Xiu and the others?" How are they? You still have the mood to ask them? You can't even protect yourself now. Elder Wensi finally couldn't help but pat the back of Chu Liuyue's head. But considering that the child was still young and looked pitiful, he couldn't bear to hit her too hard. Chu Liyue hissed, holding her head and looking at him pitifully. Elder Wensi's heart softened at first, then he shuddered. Pooey! What pitiful! This kid knew that he was amenable to coaxing but not coercion, so he deliberately looked at him like that. It must be. If he really didn't do anything, why would Bo Yen have such a reaction? Unfortunately, Bo Yen seemed to have made up his mind to block the news, and only told him to bring Chu Yu over, but didn't mention the reason. He could only speculate in his heart. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what this kid did to involve so many powerful people. Elder Wensi felt a chill run down his spine, and looked at Chu Liyue warily. This kid, could it be that one day in the future he would sell him out as well? They will deal with it themselves, you don't have to worry about it. Right now, Wan Zheng is discussing with Bo Yen how to deal with you in the Donghuang Bell Tower. Wan Zheng wants you to be there no matter what, so he asked me to bring you over first. Chu Liyue's heart warmed slightly. Elder Wan Zheng should have known about this by now, but he insisted on this request because he was concerned about her. She nodded. Thank you, Elder Wensi. Elder Wensi snorted. Let's go. As the elder who recruited Chu Yu, although he wasn't his master, he still had some responsibility. At first, he only felt happy and excited that he had recruited such a rare genius. But now, why did he feel like he had been cheated? And the longer Chu Yu stayed in the academy, the more obvious this feeling became. Elder Wensi couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. Why did he have to deal with all these troublesome people? Arriving at the Donghuang Bell Tower again and entering the hall, Chu Liyue clearly felt that the atmosphere was different from before. I've brought him, Elder Wensi said. Chu Liyue quickly looked up to take a look. In the huge hall, Elder Bo Yen and Elder Wan Zheng were sitting there. Other than them, Rong Xiu and the other two were no longer there. She retracted her gaze and bowed respectfully. Student Chu Yu greets Elder Bo Yen and Master. Elder Bo Yen gave Elder Wensi a look. Elder Wensi understood tacitly. Then you guys go ahead, I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. With that he turned and left. When his figure completely disappeared outside the door, Chu Liyue immediately felt that the atmosphere in the room had become tense. Even the air seemed to have started to condense. Two pairs of eyes that seemed to have materialized landed on her body. It was as if a sharp knife had scraped past her. Chu Yu, Bo Yen said that you caused trouble in Thousand Wine Mountain again, is that true? Elder Wan Zheng asked in a low voice. Chu Liyue nodded honestly. Student is at fault. Elder Wan Zheng took a deep breath. Elder Bo Yen snorted. Wan Zheng, he admitted it himself, what else do you want to explain for him? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1252. Elder Wan Zheng coughed and lowered his stance. Ahem, actually I'm not trying to defend him. That divine artifact needs to be refined, right? To be honest, he didn't mean to break the rules, but he couldn't. In the end, Elder Wan Zheng couldn't finish his last word. Elder Bo Yen sneered. This isn't the first time he's made a mistake. If he doesn't learn his lesson this time, in the future, although Wan Zheng felt that what Elder Bo Yen said made sense, the person in front of him was still his disciple. He couldn't bear to punish him too harshly. Not to mention that this child was refining the divine artifact's soul. Now, he was officially in possession of a venerable one-god artifact. He was secretly happy, but he couldn't show it in front of Elder Bo Yen. Yes, this punishment is necessary. Elder Wan Zheng agreed. But don't hurt the child's foundation. This was a rare good seedling. If he was hurt, they would be the ones feeling the heartache. Elder Bo Yen had already expected him to say this. Ever since he called Elder Wan Zheng over, the two had been arguing on this issue for a long time. How could he not know what Elder Wan Zheng was thinking? Elder Bo Yen shook his head helplessly. Wan Zheng, if you continue to spoil him like this, something will happen sooner or later. Elder Wan Zheng couldn't help but say. In the past, There was no one who could cause more trouble than this child. Back then, that girl also, Wan Zheng. Elder Bo Yen frowned and immediately shouted at him to stop. Only then did Elder Wan Zheng realize that he had said something wrong and fell silent. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. The girl? Almost without hesitation, Chu Liyue felt that they were talking about her. She lowered her eyes slightly, hiding the emotions that flashed across her eyes. In fact, during this period of time, she had already remembered a few things. In the past, she was almost considered a tyrant in Lingxiao College. She had done all kinds of tormenting things. She had used up all the precious herbs in the Medicine Wind Valley. One after another, it was simply uncountable. Otherwise, the elders wouldn't still have lingering fears when mentioning her after leaving the college for so long. However, until now, she still couldn't figure out how she had done those things. She didn't even know when she had broken through to the God realm. The room fell silent. Elder Bo Yen calmed himself down and looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Yu, your master loves you dearly and can't bear to punish you. However, this was a serious matter. It would be inappropriate if he was not punished. What do you think? Chu Liyue looked up, his gaze clean and sincere. Student knows his mistake and is willing to bear any punishment. Elder Wan Zheng wanted to say something but hesitated. However, seeing how resolute Chu Liyue was, he could only swallow his words. Elder Bo Yan's expression softened. For Chu Yu to have this kind of attitude, it wasn't like he was a rotten wood that couldn't be carved. However, after the previous 2 times, he no longer dared to completely believe that Chu Yu would change his ways. Originally, I discussed with your master to lock you up in Pengmin Mountain for a period of time. Chu Liyue's eyes flickered. However, I did the same thing the previous 2 times, but it didn't seem to have any warning effect on you. Elder Bo Yen could tell that Chu Yu didn't seem to be afraid of this matter at all. If it was someone else, they would have become obedient after going there once. However, Chu Yu wasn't like that at all. Therefore, he felt that this method was useless against Chu Yu. Therefore, this time, I will change to another punishment. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly felt empty. I thought I could go there again. What a pity, she paused and couldn't help but say. Elder Bo Yen, student has made a serious mistake this time and is willing to accept any punishment. You can lock me up in Pengmin Mountain again. Elder Bo Yen looked at her with a strange expression. But, do you really want to go there again? Chu Liyue tactfully stopped this topic. You misunderstood. Student means that student will be willing to accept any punishment you give. Only then did Elder Bo Yen nod in satisfaction. It's good that you have this awareness. As for your punishment, from today onwards, you will be responsible for guarding the Beast Park for a month. Beast Park? A month? Chu Liyue and Elder Wan Zheng spoke in unison. The difference was that Chu Liyue didn't know what the Beast Park was, but Elder Wan Zheng was shocked that Elder Bo Yen would punish him for a month. Bo Yen, I don't agree. Elder Wan Zheng swallowed the vulgarities that were about to come out of his mouth and slammed the table angrily. What kind of place is the Beast Park? You want him to go there for a month? Aren't you sending him to his death? This time must be reduced. Elder Bo Yan's expression was calm as he said leisurely, if it was someone else, it would naturally be dangerous. However, don't forget that Chu Yu has a contract with a divine beast. Since he has the ability to contract with a red-tailed phoenix, wouldn't he have the ability to guard the Beast Park for a month? Elder Wan Zheng choked. That's different. Those beasts in the Beast Park have always been free-range. They are untamed and violent. Even if some elders went there, they would occasionally get injured, let alone Chu Yu. You have too many concerns. Elder Bo Yen shook his head firmly. Chu Yu has caused trouble time and time again, but he is very lucky. Last time, under the siege of so many god-level experts, he managed to escape unscathed. This time, when he was refining his weapon spirit, countless Tianlei struck him, but he came out unscathed. I don't think it's enough to say that he is lucky. Chu Liyue, Elder Wan Zheng was speechless. He couldn't help it. After all, he was speaking the truth. In fact, he had been grumbling about this matter for a long time. Chu Yu kept causing trouble, but this trouble was not something that ordinary people could cause. That also required some ability. Knowing that there was no room for discussion, Elder Wanzheng hesitated for a long time before agreeing. Let him go, but if he encounters any danger, I will immediately bring him out. As he spoke, he looked at Chu Luiwei and reminded him. Chu Yu, if anything goes wrong, immediately use your Black Jade token to call for help. Master will definitely rush over immediately. Don't force yourself at any time. Do you understand? Chu Luiwei felt a warmth in his heart. Thank you, Master. Elder Wanzheng looked at the young man in front of him. Probably because he had gone through a lot yesterday, he didn't have a good rest today. His face was haggard and his lips were pale. But when he smiled like this, his eyes were clean and his smile was warm. It made people want to smile with him unconsciously. This child could only smile so innocently now. When he found out what kind of place the Beast Park was, he was afraid. Elder Bo Yen stood up. Let's go. We will send you there personally. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1253. Chu Liyue's brows twitched slightly. She had been imprisoned at Pengmin Mountain twice. The first time, it was Elder Wenxi who sent her there. The second time, it was Rong Xiu. However, this time, Elder Bo Yen actually planned to send her there personally. What exactly was the place that made him so cautious? Of course, this did not exclude the possibility that Elder Bo Yen could not assign anyone to send her there in order to prevent the news from spreading. However, judging from Elder Wanzheng's vehement objection, that Beast Park should not be a good place to stay. At the very least, when she was imprisoned at Pengmin Mountain, Elder Wanzheng was never worried about her safety. But this time, Chu Luiwei collected her thoughts and followed closely behind the two of them. The three of them came out of the Donghuang Bell Tower and went straight to the Beast Park. After walking for a while, Chu Luiwei realized that they were heading towards the Xian Master's area. Elder Wanzheng seemed to have seen through her doubts and moved closer to her to explain. Elder Wanzheng said, the Beast Park is indeed within the Xian Master's area, but it does not belong to them alone. The martial artists and Xian Master's elders will take turns to patrol here. Chu Luiwei nodded. Elder Wanzheng saw that her expression was normal and thought to himself that this brat still did not know what she was going to face later. He could not help but sigh in his heart. Chu Luiwei saw his worry and thought for a while before asking, Master, is the Beast Park very dangerous? Elder Wanzheng paused. Forget it. You will know when we get there. Chu Luiwei could only suppress her curiosity. After going around the rugged mountains, Chu Luiwei even saw a few high-level Xian formations in the middle. After about an hour, Elder Bo Yen finally stopped. We're here. The Beast Park is below us. Chu Luiwei took a few steps forward and followed Elder Bo Yan's line of sight. Dozens of mountains stretched endlessly. The trees were lush and white mist drifted in the middle of the mountains. At first glance, it looked like a quiet mountain forest. It was no different from the other places in the academy. However, Chu Luiwei knew that things were not that simple. Because in the sky above this mountain region, there was actually a huge silver profound formation. It floated quietly in the air, covering the entire forest in a translucent state. Through the gaps between the streams of light, one could clearly see the scenery below. However, everyone who stood here could feel the astonishing pressure coming from the profound formation. He would never dare to be impudent. Chu Luiwei held his breath. This Xian formation was definitely one of the best Xian formations she had ever seen in her life. Compared to the Academy's barrier, it was not inferior at all. One had to know that constructing such a Xian formation required the joint efforts of many experts. The amount of manpower and resources consumed was incalculable. To be able to construct such a Xian formation within the Academy without caring about the cost, it was enough to prove the preciousness of the area under the Xian formation. Chu Liyue's gaze carefully swept across the profound formation, and he vaguely felt a few obscure yet valiant auras. That should be the elders in charge of patrolling. In the next moment, Elder Bo Yen flew down. Elder Wanzheng patted Chu Liyue's shoulder. Let's go. Chu Luiwei nodded and rushed down without hesitation. The three of them stood about 100 meters away from the silver profound formation. Standing there, Chu Liwei could clearly feel the valiant pressure from the profound formation. I wonder what the situation inside is like, Chu Liwei thought to himself. Suddenly, an aura rapidly approached. A middle-aged man stepped out from behind the profound formation. Bo Yen Wanzheng, why are you guys here? This man was wearing a white robe, his figure was tall and skinny, and his eyes were sharp. When his gaze swept across them, it made them not dare to move. Who is this? You guys even brought a brat here? Elder Bo Yen explained, this is Chu Yu. After saying that, Chu Liwei clearly saw a look of understanding flash across the other party's face. It seemed like he had long heard of her great name. Elder Bo Yen raised his chin. This is Elder Yu. Chu Liwei inexplicably felt a little embarrassed, but he still bowed respectfully. Student Chu Yu greets Elder Yu. Chu Yu, this brat, has committed some crimes recently. Wanzheng and I have discussed and decided to throw him here for a month to let him suffer a little and learn from his mistakes. Elder Bo Yen said very straightforwardly. Elder Yu looked at Chu Liwei with some surprise. What exactly did he do to end up in such a situation? Bo Yen usually wouldn't casually put someone here, let alone for a month. How is your current strength? Elder Yu raised his chin and asked. Take note, I asked all of it. Chu Liwei paused and said sincerely, this student is currently at the middle of the 7th rank, 9th rank Celestial Physician, 9th rank Xian Master. After saying that, the scene fell silent for a moment. The three elders looked at Chu Liwei in unison. Chu Yu, when did you break through to the 9th rank of the Xian Master? Elder Wanzheng couldn't help but ask. Chu Liwei blinked. Just, not long ago. She originally didn't want to say this, but as a Xian Master, Elder Yu's eyesight was very good. She didn't dare to guarantee that if she lied now, she wouldn't be taught a lesson later. Moreover, from the fact that she could open the academy's barrier, he could basically guess this. Elder Wanzheng's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. In the end, he glanced at Elder Bo Yen and snorted. See that? This brat's strength was stronger than they expected. If something really happened to such a rare seedling, he definitely wouldn't let Bo Yen off. Not bad, you're quite honest. Elder Yu nodded. Go in. Digression. Remember to watch the pinned event. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1254. Chu Liwei was stunned. She just went in like that? Elder Yu looked at her strangely. Why, is there a problem? Chu Liwei shook her head. Seems like this Elder Yu is a swift and decisive person. But this is good too, it saves me a lot of trouble. She took half a step forward and suddenly stopped. She turned back to look at Elder Bo Yen and asked hesitantly. Elder, I wonder if Senior Rong Xiu and the others, they have their own punishments, you don't have to worry about that. Elder Bo Yen waved his hand. In this 1 month, you just have to reflect here. Seeing that she could not get anything out of him, Chu Liwei could only nod her head. This student understands. With that, she continued to walk forward and stepped through the entrance of the spirit barrier. When her figure disappeared, Elder Yu raised his eyebrows and looked at Elder Wanzheng. Wanzheng, you are really willing to part with it? Elder Wanzheng snorted and turned his head away. If Bo Yen did not insist on doing this, would he have agreed? He had only taken in this disciple for 2 months and had been locked up in Pringmin Mountain for 40 days. The amount of time he had spent cultivating with him was only slightly more than 10 days. How could he not feel heartache? But what could he do? Who asked that brat to always cause trouble? No matter how protective he was, there were times when he had no other choice. Elder Bo Yen suddenly spoke up. 1 month might not be able to smooth out his temper. He could see that he had to use extreme methods to deal with Chu Yu. Otherwise, he would not be able to suppress him. You have such a high opinion of him? Elder Yu was surprised. Elder Bo Yen laughed. Wait till he stays with you for a period of time, you will know. Elder Yu's heart jumped and a trace of uneasiness appeared. All right, since he's already here, we'll take our leave first. For the remaining month, I will leave that brat to you. Elder Bo Yen finished and was about to leave with Elder Wan Zheng. For some reason, Elder Yu Yu inexplicably felt as if he had finally gotten rid of a certain troublesome problem. Elder Wan Zheng reluctantly glanced at the barrier. Although he couldn't see anything, he still prayed for his precious disciple in his heart. This month, please don't let anything happen. After Bo Yen and Elder Wan Zheng left, Elder Yu Yu also quickly returned to the spirit barrier. Beast Park. Not long after entering this place, Chu Lue understood where this name came from. The surroundings were filled with the unique aura of magical beasts. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. That was clearly a unique smell that only came from the blood that flowed out of the torn flesh. Chu Lue was walking on a narrow path in the mountains. Bushes grew on both sides of the road, and the branches were luxuriant. The afterglow cast mottled shadows on the ground. It was silent and windless. She walked forward step by step. Occasionally, one could see the marks of magical beasts on the ground. The deeper she went, the tighter her muscles became, and her mind was highly focused. She paid full attention to every tiny sound and every subtle change in her surroundings. Along the way, she turned back to look once. Elder Yu Yu didn't follow her. Obviously, they had made up their minds to let her do everything herself. Suddenly, a low and violent tiger roar came from the side of the mountain. Chu Luiwei immediately turned to look. Separated by the dense forest, she couldn't see clearly what was going on. However, the powerful pressure contained in that roar caused her mind to go blank for a moment. That was an inestimable power. It was at least a 9th-grade magical beast. Chu Liuyue's heart instantly jumped. There were probably more than 1 or 2 magical beasts in this beast park. She took a deep breath and examined her surroundings more carefully before continuing forward. Swoosh! The sound of something piercing through the air could be heard. Chu Liuyue's eyes sharpened, and she quickly dodged to the side. An extremely sharp grayish-brown steel needle stabbed into the spot where Chu Liuyue was standing just now. The steel needle was thick at the top and sharp at the bottom. Its tip was about the size of an adult's pinky finger. The lower it went, the sharper it became. Because it was wrapped in a powerful force, the tip of the needle was still shaking slightly after it was inserted into the ground. And on the originally flat mountain ground, a few cracks suddenly appeared. This showed how powerful this thing was. If this needle were to hit her body, it would probably pierce through her flesh in an instant. But the key was that this wasn't a Yuan instrument, because there were some fresh bloodstains on its tip, and if one looked carefully, there was a layer of fine hair on it. This was obviously thing. Bang, bang. Heavy and majestic footsteps sounded, and the ground trembled. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat, and she stared in the direction of the sound. A huge figure gradually appeared in her line of sight. It was a wild beast that was brownish-black in color. It was tall and sturdy, with 4 strong legs, a silver horn on its head, and a string of steel needles on its back. This was the thing that was shot at Chu Liuyue just now. Its orange-yellow eyes were cold and indifferent, and they were wrapped in a shocking pressure. Its huge feet stepped on the ground, and its sharp claws were clearly visible. There was no doubt that this foot could directly trample a person into meat paste. Chu Liuyue's breathing stagnated. A 9th-grade steel spine beast? She had only heard of this kind of magical beast in rumors. It was said that it was born as a 9th-grade magical beast, and it was extremely strong. As it grew older, its body would rapidly expand. After it reached adulthood, it would break through the shackles and become a divine beast. It was said that the powerful god-tier steel spine beast's body was as heavy as a mountain. Wherever it went, it would be majestic. The steel needle-like thing on its back was one of its most basic trump cards. It was incomparably hard and extremely sharp. Most importantly, it contained a strong poison. Once injured, a 9th-grade martial artist of the same level would die in less than an hour. This showed how powerful this steel spine beast was. And the one in front of her, although its body was huge, it hadn't broken through to the god tier and should still be considered a cub. Of course, even if it was a cub, its body was still terrifyingly huge. Chu Liuyue stood in front of it as small as an ant. She wasn't even as tall as one of its legs. Under such circumstances, if the other party wanted to directly trample her to death, it seemed to be only a matter of minutes. Both sides were in a stalemate. The steel-spined beast first glanced at the steel needle on the ground that had missed, as if it was somewhat dissatisfied that it didn't succeed. Then, its eyes turned and looked at Chu Luiyue. Cold. Awe-inspiring. That was the disdain and indifference based on its powerful strength. A strong killing intent appeared in its eyes. Bang. It raised its leg and took a step forward. Chapter 1255. The origin power in Chu Luiyue's body surged, and starlight flashed on her fingertips. She wouldn't use Scarlet Heaven Sword unless it was a critical moment. Although the steel-spine beast in front of her was dangerous, with her current strength, she might not be a match for it. At the very least, escape was the best strategy. However, at this moment, a strange rustling sound suddenly came from behind her. Chu Luiyue didn't want to look back, but the sound was getting closer and closer, and it even carried a hint of danger. She had no choice but to be cautious. Thus, she turned her body sideways and quickly glanced in that direction. With this look, Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank, and her scalp went numb. Because what came from behind her was actually a group of snakes. Not just one, but a group of snakes entangled with each other. At a glance, there were at least 100 of them. These snakes were about the thickness of a thumb, and their bodies were colorful. Under the afterglow, they reflected a cold and magnificent light. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. Instead, her hair stood on end. Because each of these snakes was a 9th-grade magical beast, the triangular sword-toothed snake. The reason for this name was that their heads were flat and triangular. Every time they were in attack mode, 2 sharp sword-shaped teeth would be exposed, flickering with a cold white light. Of course, they were also poisonous. Their toxicity was stronger than that of the steel-spine beast. At this moment, they were in groups and were heading toward Chu Luiyue. Wherever they passed, the ground would emit a faint rustling sound. She didn't feel it earlier, but after seeing their true appearance and hearing this sound, Chu Luiyue felt her whole body go numb. Now, she was attacked from 2 sides, and she couldn't advance or retreat. In front of her was the steel-spine beast, and behind her was the triangular sword-toothed snake. No matter which one it was, she didn't have full confidence that she could finish them off or repel them without getting injured. Chu Luiyue clearly felt her whole body stiffen. If Dumpling was here now, these problems could be easily solved. After all, it was a red-tailed phoenix with a noble bloodline. Even if it only relied on this layer of natural bloodline suppression, it would be able to subdue these guys. But now, how could she beat them all by herself? At this moment, Chu Luiyue finally understood why Elder Wanzheng was so against this punishment when Elder Bo Yen suggested it. She recalled the meaningful look in Elder Wanzheng's eyes before she left. At that time, she had naively thought that it was because he couldn't bear to part with her, but now it seemed that he was clearly worried about her little life. Beast Park. Chu Luiyue crazily thought about how to solve her current predicament as she circulated all the strength in her body. 5 specks of light had already appeared on her fingertips. If she couldn't, then she could only ask the help of the 3-eyed eagle. But in the end, it was the last plan was beast was. Many of the 2 was bice beasts, beasts, be like beasts, beasts, this. Jianghu had already begun to suspect her because she had brought along a red-tailed phoenix. Fortunately, Lu Yintong had one as well, which gave her room to explain herself. But once she knew about the existence of the 3-eyed eagle, she would be able to confirm Chu Luiyue's true identity. It could be said that it was a coincidence for cultivators in this world to have beasts of the same race. But if one had 2, there was definitely a problem. Chu Luiyue didn't know much about the Beast Park. Other than Elder Bo Yen mentioning that there were a few elders patrolling the area, she wasn't sure if there were other people around. Moreover, if the elders knew about this, they wouldn't be able to keep it a secret. Although there were many elders in Lingxiao College and they each had their own duties, they still kept in contact with each other. Moreover, information was passed on very quickly. This was good for the college. It allowed the college to deal with many things quickly and efficiently. But it wasn't so good for Chu Luiyue now. The three parties were speechless. The surrounding space seemed to be solidifying inch by inch. Chu Luiyue's heart was beating violently. Thump, thump. The steel spine beast and the three-horned sword-toothed snake also noticed each other's existence. Hiss, many of the three-horned sword-toothed snakes made strange and numbing sounds. Their green eyes flashed with undisguised ruthlessness and murderous intent. Bang! The steel spine beast took a step forward. The rocks under its feet shattered and the ground shook. It didn't show any signs of weakness. Chu Luiyue instantly understood something. This is... Both parties entered a hostile state because of fighting for her? Of course, Chu Luiyue was very clear that they weren't fighting for her because they liked her. They were fighting for the right and opportunity to kill her. Fight. Start fighting. Chu Luiyue shouted silently in her heart. As long as both parties were fighting, she could find a chance to leave this place. The steel spine beast made the first move. A steel needle shot out from its back. That thing was very fast. Chu Luiyue only saw a straight and blurry mark. The next moment, she heard a familiar sound. That steel needle was inserted into the position one step away from the three-horned sword-toothed snake. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly tightened. No fiend could remain calm after being provoked like this. This time, a fierce battle was unavoidable. Hiss! Just as Chu Luiyue was waiting for the chaotic battle to begin, the three-horned sword-toothed snake suddenly started to retreat. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What was going on? They weren't fighting anymore. But before she could figure it out, the steel spine beast turned around and raised its foot to step on her. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1256. Chu Luiyue almost cursed out loud. This triangular sword-teethed snake was too useless. They were so brave just a moment ago. The steel spine beast had only launched a probing attack, and they actually retreated just like that? This decision was made too hastily. Chu Luiyue simply couldn't understand. Although the triangular sword-teethed snake's individual combat power couldn't compare to the steel spine beast, they had the advantage in numbers. They didn't even have a friendly spar. Wasn't this too cowardly? She didn't have time to think too much. Seeing the steel spine beast charging straight at her, she quickly dodged to the side. Bam! The steel spine beast stomped heavily on the ground. A rather deep pit appeared on the originally flat ground. Several cracks quickly spread out in all directions. Chu Luiyue randomly chose a direction with dense forest and quickly headed forward. She had already entered the beast park. Danger lurked in all directions. It didn't matter which direction she went. The most important thing now was to get rid of the steel spine beast as soon as possible. The denser the forest, the more advantageous it was for her. Chu Luiyue's movements were nimble. In the blink of an eye, her figure had disappeared into the lush forest. The steel spine beast raised its head and roared. The trees that were relatively close to him were crushed by this pressure and actually directly exploded. The steel spine beast lifted its leg and ran in the direction of Chu Luiyue. As for the triangular sword-teethed snake, after retreating for a distance, it suddenly dispersed. Hundreds of snakes scattered in all directions. Their bodies were very small. Once they burrowed into the grass, they could hide perfectly. Therefore, after dispersing, they burrowed into the forest and hid themselves. There was only the extremely subtle sound of snake scales sliding across the ground. It was occasionally audible, but it also disappeared very quickly. Chu Luiyue used her full speed to escape forward. She leaped and jumped like a mountain elf. Her figure was faintly discernible in the forest. But even so, she couldn't successfully shake off the steel spine beast that was chasing after her. Its destructive power was even more terrifying than Chu Luiyue had expected. She originally thought that by relying on these dense trees, she could form an obstacle to the steel spine beast and slow it down. But in reality, the steel spine beast didn't care about this at all. Its physical strength was extremely strong. Everywhere it passed, it destroyed everything in its path. Thus, one man and one beast, one at the front and one at the back, began to compete in the forest. Elder Yu stood with his hands behind his back and waited at the foot of the mountain for a while. Even if he didn't see it for himself, he could roughly guess what had happened from the changes in the energy fluctuations. He couldn't help but snort. It seemed like Chu Yu was already entangled. He didn't know how long this kid could last. One had to know that in this place, apart from the cubs, the lowest level of adult magical beasts was level 9. They were not easy to deal with. Furthermore, in order to nurture and stimulate the abilities of these magical beasts to the greatest extent, there was basically no one in the entire beast park other than a few elders who were in charge of maintenance and patrolling. These demonic beasts were especially sensitive to the aura of humans, and they were born with a strong desire to attack. Chu Yu's talent and strength were not bad, but he was still a child in the end. He was no match for these magical beasts. Let's hope this kid can survive the night. He glanced at the setting sun and shook his head with a smile. The sky quickly darkened. The forest was shady, and the lighting was even worse. As Chu Luiwei ran forward, she secretly thought of other ways. This couldn't go on. She couldn't shake off the steel-spine beasts with her own strength. Furthermore, as time passed, her physical strength was rapidly depleting, and her speed inevitably decreased. However, the steel-spine beasts seemed to be getting braver as they fought. They were born to be good at fighting, and their explosive power and endurance were extremely strong. Chu Luiwei was really worried that they would drag her to her death in the end. It wasn't that she didn't think of fighting the steel-spine beasts head-on. In fact, she had already accumulated her strength and was prepared at the beginning. However, when she saw the triangular sword-toothed snakes choose to retreat, she hesitated. To be able to make them so fearful was enough to prove the power of these steel-spine beasts. Although she could fight against a level 8 warrior now, she could only lose in front of a level 9 warrior. Moreover, level 9 warriors of the same level were far inferior to level 9 magical beasts in terms of combat strength. After thinking about it, it wasn't feasible to use force. She had to think of other ways. However, this steel-spine beast kept chasing after her relentlessly. She didn't even have a chance to breathe, so what other good ideas could she have? Suddenly, Chu Luiwei felt a warning in her heart. Her mind was highly tense, and she immediately forced herself to stop. Previously, she had been moving forward at high speed. Now that she suddenly stopped, it caused the blood in her lungs to churn. However, she couldn't care less about this now. Because danger was ahead. Bang! The sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. This sound was somewhat familiar. It was very similar to the footsteps of the steel-spine beasts, but it was several times heavier. This time, she clearly hadn't seen the other party's shadow, but Chu Luiwei felt that the other party had directly stepped on her heart. She stood on a tree and held onto the tree trunk with one hand. Her entire body was tense, and she almost suffocated. The next moment, a figure that was like a small mountain appeared in front of her. With just a glance, Chu Luiwei immediately recognized that this was also a steel-spine beast. Moreover, its body size was several times that of the previous one. This was definitely an adult steel-spine beast. It was walking towards her. Trees fell and rocks shattered. For a moment, Chu Luiwei almost suspected that this mountain might be flattened by it. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, for some reason, the steel-spine beast behind her suddenly sped up. Roar! This cry was very different from the previous one. It lacked the cold and dignified aura and had a hint of joy and coquettishness. And this was clearly aimed at the steel-spine beast that had just appeared opposite them. Chu Luiwei hurriedly turned back to take a look, and her heart immediately turned cold. These two seemed to be mother and son. Then what other way did she have to leave this place safely and unharmed? Her hands were tightly clasped on the tree trunk, and her knuckles turned white. Because of the long run, she had consumed a lot of strength. At this time, her forehead was already covered with fine beads of sweat, and her back was almost drenched. I can't go on like this, Chu Luiwei gritted her teeth. If I'm really forced into a desperate situation, then I have no choice but to show my trump card. Boom. The steel spine beast cub rushed over and directly hit the tree Chu Luiwei was on. The tree, which was as thick as two people hugging it, instantly collapsed. Chu Luiwei tiptoed and was about to fly up. However, the steel spine beast seemed to have expected it and directly pounced over. Chapter 1257. If this stomp landed, Chu Luiwei would probably become a pile of minced meat on the spot. Chu Luiwei's mind raced, and a biting cold aura gathered in her palm. However, just as that kick was about to land and Chu Luiwei was about to fight to the death, the adult steel spine beast that was originally standing opposite suddenly rushed over and knocked the steel spine beast to the ground with its head. Bang! The steel spine beast cub's heavy body flew out, and the trees along the way fell one after another. After dragging for a long distance, it finally stopped. There was a deep rut left on the ground, and gravel and broken wood were scattered everywhere. It was a mess. Chu Luiwei was dumbfounded. The steel spine beast cub that was sent flying was also dumbfounded. The surroundings were silent. Chu Luiwei stiffened her neck and looked at the adult steel spine beast standing beside her. What's going on? Why is it helping me? Could it be that the steel spine beast cub isn't its? But soon she dispelled this guess. Because after the steel spine beast cub came back to its senses, it didn't get up and just wailed. Roar! Chu Luiwei subconsciously looked back and saw it lying on the ground, looking at the adult steel spine beast in disbelief. Its eyes were filled with grievance and pity. Roar, roar! The next moment, Chu Luiwei clearly saw a layer of mist quickly accumulating in the cub's lantern-like eyes. Drip, drip. Fist-sized teardrops kept falling and hitting the ground, creating small puddles. Chu Luiwei, if it weren't for my parents, it probably wouldn't have such a reaction. However, this cub didn't seem to be very well received. Because when the adult steel spine beast saw it crying, not only did it not comfort it, but it also walked over and kicked it. The cub didn't expect his parents to be so ruthless to him. He didn't pay attention and was kicked out again. The crying stopped abruptly, and then it rolled a few more times. Perhaps it was because the steelback beast was naturally thick-skinned, so it didn't show any mercy this time. The sound of flesh and bones being kicked made Chu Luiwei's eyes twitch. I really didn't expect things to develop in this direction. Roar! The adult steelback beast roared at the cub, sounding a little strict. The cub had suffered a loss and learned its lesson. Finally, it no longer dared to cause trouble. It put away its previous temper and obediently admitted its mistake. The adult steel spine beast roared again. It was unknown what it said, but the cub suddenly raised its head. A look of shock flashed across its eyes. Then, it glanced at Chu Luiwei and shook its head frantically. Roar! The adult steel spine beast let out another roar, causing the cub to pause and immediately become obedient. Chu Luiwei stood aside awkwardly. Why did it seem like he was the one who got into a fight with the other party's child? But after the other party's parents came, not only did they not blame him, they even lectured his child? Wasn't the quality of this adult steel spine beast a little too high? Chu Luiwei originally wanted to leave. However, considering that he couldn't even compare to the cub's speed, he definitely had no chance against this adult steel spine beast. He might as well stay here and see what the other party's attitude was. After waiting for a while, the two steel spine beasts finally finished their conversation. Of course, this conversation was only the adult steel spine beast teaching the cub a lesson. But the adult steel spine beast walked over. The cub followed behind dejectedly. Chu Luiwei's heart tightened. It's here. She subconsciously straightened her back and looked up. It couldn't be helped. The other party was too big. Chu Luiwei could only see the other party's thigh. The adult steel spine beast stood not far in front of her. On the other hand, the cub moved over step by step. Anyone could see that its face was full of reluctance. As if disdaining its slow movements, the adult steel spine beast behind it raised its leg and kicked its butt again. The cub almost flew up from the kick and subconsciously turned its head. It originally wanted to protest, but when it met the pair of intimidating eyes, it immediately stopped. After hesitating for a while, it only let out a low sound from its throat, which sounded very pitiful. The adult steel spine beast was unmoved and raised its head. The cub could only retract its gaze and walk over to Chu Luiyue step by step. The human and beast looked at each other. The cub glared at Chu Luiyue and then lowered its head, aggrieved. Chu Luiyue was still confused when she saw the steel spine beast cub's head stretch out in front of her. The silver horn was not far in front of her. She could reach it by raising her hand. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then suddenly understood something. This is an apology. As soon as this guess appeared, Chu Luiyue subconsciously wanted to deny it. Because this was simply too absurd. One had to know that a moment ago, she was being chased by this steel spine beast with nowhere to run and almost died at its feet. And now, not only did it stop attacking, but it was also apologizing so humbly. This was simply too shocking. However, other than this reason, Chu Luiyue could not think of any other explanation. She looked at the adult steel spine beast behind her in a daze. She saw that pair of eyes. Deep, dignified, but with a trace of undetectable nostalgia. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt an extremely familiar feeling in her heart. This steel spine beast. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. A bold idea quickly flashed through her mind. Perhaps she had met it long ago? As if sensing her emotional fluctuations, the steel-backed beast finally came forward. It looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes and lowered its head. Unfortunately, it was still too tall. Even if Chu Luiyue raised her hand, she couldn't reach it. After realizing this, it blinked and half-knelt without any hesitation. Then it moved forward, gentle and dependent. Chu Luiyue felt something rush out from the bottom of her heart. She subconsciously reached out and stroked its head. The steel spine beast's skin and flesh were very rough and hard. It felt like touching a piece of iron. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue's heart softened. Suddenly, her gaze focused and she saw that there seemed to be a scar on the steel spine beast's horn. It looked like someone had cut it with a sharp weapon, about half an inch long. It was difficult to notice from afar, but standing close, it was clearly visible. Chu Luiyue subconsciously touched it. In an instant, images rushed out from her mind. She frowned and almost fell to the ground. The steel spine beast looked at her worriedly. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and took a step forward, leaning closer to it. The steel spine beast let her hug it without moving. The cub watched from the side, not knowing what to do. After a long time, Chu Luiyue sighed softly. Chiong, I'm back. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1258. Ever since she knew that she had lost a part of her memory, Chu Luiyue started to think of all sorts of ways to make herself remember. Previously, she had tried many methods and experienced a lot of torture, but most of the time, it was futile. She couldn't remember no matter how hard she tried. She didn't remember how she came to the Divine Ruins world. She didn't know how she got first place on the Green Cloud roll. She didn't know what she had done in Lingxiao College and why she had forgotten everything in the end. Many times, she even felt that what she did was meaningless. Since the fog was already there and she couldn't see clearly, wouldn't it be better if she didn't look at it? But now, she finally realized that it wasn't meaningless. Because what was behind the fog was the scenery that she couldn't bear to forget. Just like now, she suddenly remembered some of the things that happened in the Beast Park. Even though her memory was still incomplete and not very clear, but it was still very precious to her. Chiong. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and hid the tears in her eyes. She hugged it tightly, then let go of her hand and took a few steps back. She carefully sized it up and smiled brightly. Chiong, you've grown up. A few years ago, when they first met in the Beast Park, it wasn't much older than the cub next to it. She didn't expect it to be an adult now and even have a child. Chiong intimately rubbed against her palm and stood up. Its eyes were filled with joy and excitement. Actually, at the beginning, it wasn't too sure about Chu Luiyue's identity, so it had a cautious attitude. But now, it could finally be at ease. Oh, the cub, who had been ignored for a long time, finally found a chance to interrupt. Its eyes moved back and forth between Chu Luiyue and its mother, full of confusion and confusion. Obviously, it had been ignorant until now. It was clearly its mother's son. Why did its mother treat this human who suddenly appeared better than it did itself? Chu Liwei looked at its jealous and angry expression and couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I won't snatch your mother. The cub's eyes were full of suspicion. Not snatching? Then why was its mother so good to it? And she even hugged her mother just now. Not to mention that her mother had hit it for the first time because of her. It was very angry, and the consequences were very serious. Thus, it went to its mother's side and rubbed itself against her like a spoiled child, looking at her with eager eyes. Let her go. Let her go. Let her go. Bang. Its body was once again kicked away by its mother. I can't live like this anymore, Wu. Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched slightly. Qiong, you're a mother now. Why hasn't your temper changed at all? He's your son after all, ao. Exactly. To think that even this human would say something like that. Mother sure is ruthless. Qiong glanced at it. It quickly shut its mouth, not daring to say another word. It finally understood that this human was its natural nemesis. Unfortunately, her mother was too biased towards her, so she definitely couldn't do anything today. We'll wait until we have a chance to counterattack. Seeing that it had finally calmed down, Qiong looked at Chu Liwei. How would this little fellow understand? If it wasn't for this woman in front of it, it would have ceased to exist long ago. Chu Liwei laughed. Let's go. Let's go and see your current home. Late at night, the moon was in the middle of the sky. Elder Yu Yu, who was sitting on a certain mountain, kept the Xian formation in front of him and looked up. It's already so late. I wonder how Chu Yu is doing now. Thinking of this, he looked towards the distant mountains. In the quiet night, other than the occasional wind blowing through the mountains, there was no other sound. Everything was the same as usual. Strange. Elder Yu Yu stroked his beard. Logically speaking, when a stranger enters the beast park, it will definitely attract the attacks of many magical beasts. It shouldn't be so quiet. This situation was really strange. But he was sure that Chu Yu wasn't in trouble. Otherwise, the Xian formation would have already acted strangely. Could it be that he found a secluded place to hide? Suddenly, he clapped his hands. Fiske, how could I forget that he still has a contracted divine beast? It was said that it was a red-tailed phoenix with a very pure bloodline. With such a divine beast keeping watch, ordinary magical beasts really wouldn't find trouble with him. This saved Chu Yu a lot of trouble. Elder Yu Yu couldn't help but laugh. Let's hope that tomorrow can still be so peaceful. In this beast park, there was an existence that wasn't afraid of the red-tailed phoenix. That night, with Qiong's help, Chu Liwei could finally rest peacefully. In the cave where they lived, Chu Liwei and Qiong chatted briefly about some things. Then, she leaned against a huge rock alone and rested her head on her arm, planning to sleep. Qiong also knew that she was very tired today, so she didn't disturb her and stayed by her side to guard her. But Chu Liwei didn't sleep well. In her dream, there were some familiar and unfamiliar scenes. Most of them were related to the beast park. Of course, there was also Qiong. Speaking of which, they could be considered to be fated. When Chu Liwei first came to the beast park, the first magical beast she encountered was it. At that time, it was being chased by other divine beasts. While fleeing in a sorry state, it met Chu Liwei. She helped it escape and even gave it a name. But there was no contract. Chu Liwei thought. At that time, she had already contracted Dumpling. Suddenly, Chu Liwei opened her eyes. Dumpling had also followed her to the Divine Ruins world. She actually never thought of asking it what it still remembered. Digression, I apologize to everyone again. Yesterday, there was a blunder. I originally planned to refund everyone's Xiaoxiang dollars, but because there were many subscription platforms, Hongxiu, QQ, and other readers couldn't refund them one by one. So, in the end, I replaced the repeated chapter with today's first update. Those who have subscribed can continue to read as usual. I'm really sorry for causing trouble for everyone. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1259. Sensing the movement on Chu Liyue's side, both of them looked over. Qiong looked at her worriedly. Chu Liyue gave it a reassuring look. "Don't worry, I'm fine." As she said that, she rubbed her temples. That's right, why didn't I think of it before? When she was in her teens, she had already made a contract with her own magical beast. At that time, Dumpling was only a 9-colored heavenly pheasant, but at that time, it was already considered one of the most powerful magical beasts in the entire Tianling dynasty. After she successfully made the contract, her father even held a palace banquet to celebrate. From then on, Dumpling had been following her. And coming to the Divine Ruins world was something that happened later. Logically speaking, Dumpling should have come with her at that time. But after so long, Dumpling had never mentioned this. Dumpling. Chu Liyue called out in her heart, but there was no response. Only then did she remember that Dumpling had stayed at Thousand Wine Mountain and was not by her side now. She frowned. It seemed that she would have to wait a month before she could clarify this matter. She sat in a daze for a while before lying down again. This time, she finally fell asleep in a daze. While Chu Liyue spent the night in the Beast Park with complicated feelings, the people outside were also not calm. Thousand Wine Mountain. On the top of the mountain, beside the spring, there were a few figures standing. Standing in the middle was Elder Bo Yen. Beside him were Elder Ouyang and Shang Yusen. "Is this what you've done?" Elder Bo Yen looked around and asked faintly. Even though he had heard them talk about it before, when he saw this scene, he could not help but feel angry. These people really knew how to cause trouble. The punishment from before was really too light. Cough. Elder Ouyang coughed. "Actually, it's mainly the surrounding trees and rocks that were destroyed, but there's no problem with the spring," Elder Bo Yen sneered. "If there was a problem with the spring, do you think I would still be here talking to you about this?" Elder Ouyang shut his mouth awkwardly. Shang Yusen was still relatively relaxed. "Ai, Bo Yen, since this has already happened, there's no point in talking about it anymore, right? What's more, those who should be punished have already been punished. None of us escaped punishment, right? Why don't we start right away and restore this place as soon as possible?" Elder Bo Yen gave him a warning look. There will be no next time. Although the 10,000 Wine Mountain had been sealed, it could only be repaired at night. That was why they had waited until now to come. As he spoke, Elder Bo Yen walked to the side of the spring and carefully examined it. The mouth of the spring, which gurgled during the day, became very calm at night. Under the calm surface of the water, streaks of silver tianlei gathered and intertwined with each other. "I already said that there's nothing wrong with the spring." Shang Yusen laughed. "You don't trust me and Ouyang? At that time, we were very careful." Elder Bo Yen looked away. "This spring has great implications. It's best to be cautious." After all, they had caused such a huge commotion, so of course he would be worried. Elder Ouyang nodded in agreement. "Bo Yen is right. For this thing, our entire academy has put in a lot of effort. We don't dare to have any problems. Calculating the time, it seems that it's almost time, right?" Elder Bo Yen shook his head. "It was originally going to end, but some time ago, Chu Yu came and caused a ruckus, causing the number of Tianlei in here to decrease. The time was delayed again. Fortunately, he didn't take much away at that time. After some time, it will be able to recover." Elder Ouyang sighed. "In the end, this Chu Yu really knows how to cause trouble. Fortunately, you threw him into the Beast Park this time. You have to polish his character properly. Otherwise, what would happen if he was always so bold and arrogant?" Elder Bo Yen nodded. "I think so too. Chu Yu had a precious treasure in his hands, so it was inevitable that he would attract the envy and jealousy of many people. If he didn't improve his strength as soon as possible, no one knew what would happen in the future. After all, it was impossible for any so-called backer to protect him from afar all the time. In the end, becoming stronger was the most important thing. I wonder how that kid is doing in the Beast Park now." As Elder Ouyang spoke, he glanced in the direction of the Beast Park. "He probably won't be able to sleep on the first night, right?" Elder Bo Yen laughed. "He has a red-tailed phoenix. Don't worry too much. If he didn't know about this contracted divine beast, He wouldn't have dared to put Chuyu in the beast park for a month. Suddenly, there seemed to be a sound coming from the spring. Elder Bo Yen immediately lowered his head to look, but only saw a shallow ripple spreading from within. He stared for a while and only retracted his gaze after confirming that there was nothing unusual. Let's begin. The three of them separated and began to repair the area they were in charge of. In the spring, several tianlei flickered quietly. A streak of red flashed across the ink-like water. A night passed in the blink of an eye. When Chu Luiwei woke up, the sky was already bright. A Qiong was guarding outside the cave, but the cub wasn't there. It seemed to have gone out. Hearing the movement, A Qiong turned around. Chu Luiwei got up and walked outside. She stretched her muscles and bones, and heard the sound of bones cracking. She looked forward with a smile on her lips. This place is still the same as before. It's a good place to cultivate. A Qiong looked at her curiously, as if she was asking for her opinion. Chu Luiwei smiled. A Qiong, I'm going into seclusion from today onwards. I'll have to trouble you to guard me. A Qiong nodded. Chu Luiwei felt much more at ease. She turned around and returned to the cave. Yes, she was preparing to break through to the peak of the 7th level. Ever since she recovered her Tianjing Yuan Meridian, her cultivation speed had increased by a lot. After coming to Lingxiao College, the rich force of heaven and earth was like adding wings to a tiger. In addition, she had experienced all these before. Hence, even if there was no one to guide her, she could still break through smoothly. Now, she only needed a relatively quiet and stable environment. Some of the magical beasts in the Beast Park were reared in the past, while some were brought back by the elders and students from outside. The number of divine beasts was not small. If Chu Luiwei was alone, she would definitely not choose to break through at this time and place. But now that A Qiong was here, she could be more at ease. These divine beasts were afraid of each other. Usually, they wouldn't invade each other and lived in harmony. She basically wouldn't have any problems cultivating in A Qiong's cave. She sat cross-legged, her shoulders drooping naturally, and her hands on her knees. Then, she closed her eyes and started to absorb the force of heaven and earth around her quickly. Streaks of energy rushed into her body. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.